Kent, new Big Ten head coaches this season. So obviously you could talk about Dana Altman and Mick Cronin if you wanted to. However, I'm just going at new guys hired. So we'll keep it to 4 coaches. Why am I blanking on his name? The Michigan coach.
Dusty May.
Why did I blank on his name?
Dustin.
I'm struggling tonight, man. Dusty May for Michigan, Jake Diebler for Ohio State, Eric Musselman for USC, and Danny Sprinkle for Washington. And I went through and looked at the numbers and tried to find the average record over the past 5 years. Now, the reason I did this is because Jake Diebler came out and said, we will not lower the standard at Ohio State, which it's like, okay, well, say you're going to raise the standard. And that's like, we are not going to lose this game. It's like, okay, go win the game, like, I don't know, like, go tell us you're going to win the game. I don't know. Maybe I'm being picky here, but, so what I looked at was kind of what the standard had been the past 5 years at each of these 4 programs. Michigan has had 1 regular season championship in the Big Ten. They have not had a conference championship. None of these teams have had a conference championship, and Ohio State, USC, and Washington have not had a regular season championship since 2019-2020 season. Michigan in that time has been 17.4 and 14.4. Ohio State has been 20 and 13. USC has been 22 and 10.8. And Washington, the only team with an average losing record of 14 and 16.8. So my question to you, Kent, all right, is do you believe any of these coaches will raise or lower the standard? Not any of these. Let's go coach by coach. Do you believe the coach will raise or lower the standard at their program over the past 5 years? Let's start with Dusty May.
I think that for Dusty May, it's a really difficult question because I think out of all these coaches, he's the hardest one because I'm wondering, are we saying the standard is what this average record is or what Michigan fan standard is or what the general public standard is? Like, whatever you
want to go with. I just ran the numbers for the average record to give us kind of like do you think they're going to win more than 17 games on average per season? But if you want to go by like fans or media or something like that, I'm cool with that too.
Okay. I'll say for Dusty May, I think that in general, he is going to raise the program's standards because Juwan Howard has lowered it so much.
Yes.
For as far as, what happens in the locker room, academics, big one this past year especially, and of course winning, like another big one this past year especially. But if you look at the last 5 seasons, Juwan Howard did do some winning, so just strictly based off the average record, it's going to be close on whether his average the next 5 years, let's say if he stays there, is going to be better than that or not. I would see him, hovering around that 20-win mark every year. I think he's a good coach. I think he's proven this offseason that he can recruit the transfer portal and also still recruit high school kids. So I don't think that Michigan's going to get worse. They can't get worse than last year. And I think that as a program overall, it's getting a facelift, just as far as I shouldn't say it like that because that kind of sounds a little bit race charged. But what I'm trying to say is that
you don't mean it that way.
Yeah, I don't mean it that way at all. The standard is changing overall for the whole program is what I'm trying to get at from where it's been the last couple of years. So I'll say it is raising with Dusty May.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer raised, especially after the past couple seasons. The one thing for me in there is that Juwan did win the regular season championship for the Big Ten in 2021, I believe it was. Now, of course, you're going to get people say, well, that was with Beeline's guys and stuff like that, and he was kind of left over with that. And I think that's valid to a certain extent, but and he did make multiple or just one Sweet 16?
Multiple.
Multiple. Okay. So he did go to a couple Sweet 16s. So, I mean, like, do I think he's going to win more than 17 games per season? Yes. I think Michigan is too good of a basketball program for them to go out and hire a high quality coach like Dusty May for them not to win more than 17 games per season. Do I think it's a given that he's going to just here in the next few years win a Big Ten championship and make a deep run in the NCAA tournament? I mean, I could see him winning the Big Ten championship, but the NCAA tournament is so hard to predict every year. I mean, unless you're Kansas, unless you're, some of these teams that just make it far every single year, UConn, like that, like it's so hard to predict that somebody is going to make a Sweet 16, somebody is going to make an Elite Eight. I mean, we've seen really, really good coaches. Matt Painter struggled to do that. So by wins and losses, yes, I think he'll raise the standard over the past 5 years. Will he accomplish all the things that Juwan Howard accomplished? I think so, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of where I fall too. And especially if you start digging back farther, when you're talking about standards, if you're looking back at like years prior to that, even they made a couple national championship games. And I don't think that Dusty May is necessarily going to do that, within the next even 7 years, I guess. I think that would be a very, it's an obtainable goal, but it's not something that I can like put a stamp on and be like, he's going to keep the standard the same and raise it because he's going to go to a national championship game. I'm not so sure about that. He might not do that, but like I said, I think it's a good hire. I think that across the board with academics, with recruiting, and with everything else that happens within a basketball program, the standard has been raised.
I agree. Philip says, does Michigan get 5 years of Dusty before Indiana comes to get him? That was the number one reason why I didn't want Dusty May to come to Ohio State. But obviously, I mean, I'm talking about Jake Diebler here in a second. It's going to sound like I would have rather had Dusty May than Jake Diebler. But I mean,
when's the last time that's happened that a coach is like, I can't even think of a coach that has switched teams like within the conference. I know it's probably happened before, and maybe I'm missing one that's happened like super recently, but I don't see that happening. Like that would be that'd be a big shock to me. Even if it is Dusty May in Indiana, I would be really shocked to see him switch teams in conference. That would be,
I mean, in my opinion, if that was going to happen, number one, it can definitely happen.
Right.
It doesn't happen often, like you said, but because of Dusty May's like allegiance, I don't know if allegiance, but his history with Indiana, it certainly can happen. And that would be like my biggest fear in the world. Philip says Chris Beard, Texas Tech to Texas. So that's a good example in the Big 12. I don't know if I can think of an example in the Big 10, but as far as I'm concerned, the way it happens, if Mike Woodson just really gets IU, running and doing well, and 3-4 years from now, Mike Woodson decides to, hang it up and say, I've done what I was supposed to do. We've got Indiana back to the tournament consistently. They've competed for the Big Ten consistently, and I'm going to, move on and give it to the next guy. I could see Dusty May taking that over because it's a good situation and someplace he can win and someplace he has history with. But if Mike Woodson drives the program into the ground, I don't know if you can see that happening.
If I was going to answer that question though, real quick though, JR, I would say that he's definitely not going in the next 5 years. I don't think, unless you, like you said, it would have to be like Woodson would have to go on a run, because in my opinion, what's going to happen with Indiana, they're either going to be really good the next few years and Woodson hangs on for that whole 5 years, maybe. Don't know what his contract situation is. Or they're going to be bad and they're going to get rid of him in the next 2 years. And I think it's too early at that point for Dusty May to leave Michigan to go to a team that's inside of the conference. So, yeah, I would predict that Indiana will not have Dusty May in the next 5 years. That's my prediction.
I think I would probably predict that too, but I can't say it's not a possibility. I can't completely rule it out. So,
yeah.
Ed Cooley, Providence, Georgetown, another good example there from Philip. All of these are coming back now. Chris Beard, he did go to Ole Miss after Texas, but of course he had that fallout at Texas, and that's why he left there.
I don't know if it's happened in the Big Ten before.
I don't think it's happened in the Big Ten. No.
But I guess with more teams joining, the possibilities of that happening is higher at this point.
Hey, in football, we just had Ohio State hire a head coach in the Big Ten to be their offensive coordinator. So it could happen.
We did have some movement. I can't remember now because it was a few weeks back, but I believe we had some assistant coaches move this offseason within the conference, and I just can't quite remember who it was now.
Taylor Battle went from Northwestern to Ohio State. I remember that one. There were a couple other ones, but I can't remember exactly off the top of my head either.
That's a win for Diebler, getting him away from Collins.
Yeah. Collins, one of the best coaches, if not the
best. Or maybe you know what?
that
Maybe
Collins
he's not
coaching
that
tree.
good. Maybe Collins knows something that Diebler doesn't. Maybe he's not that good.
Okay, shut up. Jeff Parks, if Woodson doesn't make the dance this year, he'll be gone. I agree. I think he
For
had the
sure.
heat last year. I think he got Bryson Tucker, which was helpful after losing out on the
He will make
Neely.
the dance this year, by the way. Indiana is for sure going to
Dude,
the
he
tournament.
has to. He has to. But
I
that's
am
part of it. Like,
confident.
that's the part of it. Like, if he doesn't, it's like, dude, you just squandered all this talent.
Yeah.
This year should be very good. No excuse for not winning with the squad. Totally agree. All right, we got to move on. Jake Diebler, I think, so resident Ohio State fan here. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts. I could see it happening, but at the same time, I don't like the quote of "we are not going to lower the standard." It's like, okay, well, then say you're going to raise the standard. Okay, like let's not shoot for like we are not going to be worse than Chris Holtman was, who finished second last in the Big Ten just 2 years ago. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, I don't want to hear that we're going to be third last. You know, like I want to hear that we're going to be in the top five. We're going to be in the top half of the conference consistently. We're going to battle and contend for the Big Ten and the Big Ten tournament. Like I want to hear that stuff. But I mean, 20 wins, like it's wild that Chris Holtman the past 5 years has averaged 20 wins in the Big Ten and he just got fired. Now I'm not justifying it or not saying it wasn't justified at all. I think it was justified to hire Chris Holtman, but that just kind of speaks to the 3 years that he had before. I mean, this was a top 25 program every single year. And then, you know, he got some young players and didn't know what to do with them. But do I think Jake Diebler is going to win more than 20 games every single season? I can see it happening. I don't feel great about it happening. Kent, help me decide here. What say you?
In my notes, I wrote down that I think he's going to lower the standard based off of just wins alone. I don't think that it's realistic for us to expect, you know, Diebler to go in there and get 20 wins a season and say, like, in the next 5 years, the average is going to be 21 wins a season. Like that's what you're saying when you're saying you're raising the standard for the record. Now, I will say that from a public perception, I think that he has raised the standard because people hated Holtman so much. You know, like everybody wanted him gone, right? So I feel like from that point of view, he's raised the standard, and the rest of it, I feel like, is an unknown because the rest of the guys that we're about to talk about have all coached before, and they've been head coaches before, and Diebler wasn't. So it's not like we have a track record to, beside this past year, of course, the games that he coached. He doesn't have a huge track record that we could go back and be like, this is how good he does with recruiting in the past. This is how good he does in big games in the past, except for the Purdue game. We have that. But, you know, we don't have anything to measure it against, so I can't really say that he's going to raise the standard in any of the other departments at this point. Like you said, it's an unknown. But if you're just looking at the record and you compare the next 5 years to this average that you just pulled up, 20 and 13, I think it's going to be lower the next 5 years.
And see, I really don't have a great disagreement with that. I mean, like, I do cling to the Purdue win. I do cling to the win against Michigan State on the road. I do cling to the Illinois game. I think that he coached that game very well. I don't like to blame the refs consistently, and I'm not going to blame the refs, but I do think that, you know, the refereeing in that game was a little questionable, and I think that if it was a little bit better, you would have seen Ohio State possibly win. But at the end of the day, you lost the game. Doesn't matter. Refs are going to ref the way they do. So I'm not going to blame them. But at the end of the day, like, he has potential. He has shown that he can coach in game and do a good job with these players. It's just, and he has the connections. His dad was a high school coach in Ohio for a long time. His brother, John Diebler, legend at Ohio State, coaching over at Butler now. So I don't know. I'm on that fence, and I lean toward he's going to be better, but I also acknowledge that I'm probably a little bit biased. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. Kent, USC, Eric Musselman comes in, and USC actually with the best average record here of all four of the teams, 22 and 10.8. They do not have any regular season championships. They do not have any conference tournament championships. I could see Eric Musselman getting in the next 5 years a conference championship in the regular season or a conference tournament championship. I do think that there will be seasons when he has a little bit of a hard time, but I think overall, he's going to get over 20 wins, and if he gets over 20 wins, he'll hover right around 22. And if he wins the conference in some way, shape, or form, that's raising the standard. So, you agree? Do you think Eric Musselman will, at the very least, slightly raise the standard at USC?
Yeah, I do agree. I was actually shocked by that average record, especially like what was their record last year? Were they that good last year? And I just didn't know about them. I feel like they weren't that great last year. I don't know. I didn't watch them a ton, but no, I totally agree. I think this is a coach that's going to be able to make tournament runs. He's going to be able to make a Big Ten tournament run. We talked about that already. He's going to be able to make tournaments in general. You know, like in this conference, that's going to be something that a lot of teams can't say they can do every year. So I think USC will be able to do that. Again, I'll say the same thing I said about Diebler. 22 wins is a lot to get every year. And I will double back just a little bit too. It also depends on what your non-conference scheduling is going to be. You know, if you're just going to talk about the wins, if you're a team like Michigan State and you're going to schedule really hard teams every year, you know, your average is going to be a little bit lower because you're playing ranked teams all the time. If you're somebody like, you know, I was just on Locked On Illini last week. We were talking about Indiana's schedule. Their schedule was super soft in the non-conference, so their wins might be a little bit higher on average. So if you're just looking at the wins, it might be tough to say, you know, for sure it's going to be higher than 22, but I 100% agree with you. I think it's going to be over 20, and I think it's going to be right at that mark. And I also think that they're going to be in the running for Big Ten tournaments and regular season conference championships, so the standard has been raised there as well.
Yeah, I agree. I went back and looked at the records just to get a little bit of a reference. And since 2019, Andy Enfield had USC doing really, really well. Now they only got to the first round, or they didn't get out of the first round the 2 years prior to this past year. So obviously you're going to have the fans pretty upset about that. But 2019, 2020, 22 wins. Next year, 25 wins. Next year, 26 wins. Next year, 22 wins. And this last year, they're 15 and 18. So obviously a downer year. And after losing in the first round 2 years in a row, that's not popular with the fan.
I apologize, USC. I was not familiar with your game. I did not know they were winning that many games every year.
Well, their fans hated Infield so much that, you know, it was hard to know. They were top 5 at one point in 2021 and 2022. So now these past 5 years, he only finished in the top 25 twice, and he was 24th and 22nd. So he did get a good number of wins, but so must have had a pretty easy schedule. But
yeah, I didn't realize he was there for. So I just pulled up their like yearly record as well. I didn't realize he was there for that long either.
Same as Collins.
There for like 10 years.
2014. So
good for
Collins
him.
Outlasted him. Again, Collins, great coach. All right.
So we both agree that he's raising the standard than Eric Musselman is.
Yes, I agree.
Awesome.
If nothing else, but because I think he's going to win some championships, and I think he'll do better in the tournament than Enfield did. So, all right, last one, Washington, Danny Sprinkle. I don't think it's too hard to raise the standard here. 14 and 16.8 average record over the past 5 years. No conference tournament championships, no regular season championships. Washington, obviously a pretty hard place to recruit, but if you have the financial backing to be able to pay $2 million to Great Osobor, I mean, I think he's going to raise it, especially if he has that kind of financial backing. I think the Big Ten is going to be tough, but I mean, I don't see them stooping down to what Minnesota and Nebraska were the past few years. I mean, I could see them being higher than that, being maybe a middle of the road Big Ten team, maybe just a little bit lower than that at the very least. They might pop down to last, like I talked about, maybe a season or two, but I think he's going to raise the standard. What say you, Kent?
This is the only person that I wrote down. It's going to stay the same. I think it's going to be right at that level. I just don't see, I don't know if it's something that is, you know, I'm going to have to be convinced otherwise, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. When I see them actually play this year and I see Danny Sprinkle and the type of coach that he is, then I can make a more confident, you know, assertion on what's really going to happen at Washington in the next few years. But I don't really know him. And my recollection of Washington is exactly this right here: a below 500 team, a school that doesn't get a ton of big recruits, and it's just not, the most fun. I will say they're not the most fun to follow. So I would say that it's probably going to stay the same at least for a couple years, and I need to see some big changes happen before I say, yeah, this is about to turn around right here. I think it's going to be about right here for a while.
I can definitely see that. I kind of just lean over just because it has been so bad, and like I said,
Like, who would you
NIL
pick
backup,
Washington to beat right now in our conference? Like, who are they beating? Like, and you're going to put your name on the line that, like, they're for sure going to beat this team.
I think they'll beat Iowa. I don't love Iowa coming back this next year. I know people love Maryland, but I think they could beat Maryland.
I don't know. I'm not so sure. I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not
like
really
for them to
projecting
give
this year as much as I'm looking at the next 5 years.
I got you.
And like I said, bringing in better players. But I'm with you with, like, if they pay a guy $2 million and that guy isn't even changing the program to the point where they're going to bring in better players, maybe the NIL means nothing. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Philip says Maryland because Willard sucks.
That's fact. That's the only coach that I've ever said anything bad about on this show, or ever, I think, is Willard. So I agree, Philip.
I love
Not
the
a big fan.
analysis. I love the analysis from the chat.